Welcome everyone to the DJ Starr Show. I am your host, DJ Starr, and Happy New Year. We are in 2022. Who would have ever thought? This is crazy, right? We had a roller coaster ride a couple of years, but that's okay. We're back. I'm excited for brand new shows coming up. And let me tell you, I want you guys to sit back, relax, and let's talk. Welcome everyone to the DJ Starr Show. And this is my first show for 2022, so Happy New Year. I'm excited, and I'm so excited for our guests today, our guest panelists today. We have a phenomenal show set up for you all. And right now, guess where we're at though? We're here in the city of Buffalo. We're on location at the Merriweather Library here at 1324 Jefferson Avenue. So I'm so excited to be here. And guess what else we're at? We're at the Dr. Eva M. Doyle Auditorium. So this is phenomenal. So today's topic is Buffalo, New York housing, tenant and property owner rights. So we want to jump in and introduce our guests right here. Right here we have Vincent Rondinelli, we have Christina Tretter-Herriger, and we have Adam L. Bojak here. So we're excited to have you all here at the show. And so let's start with a little introduction. Let's start with you, Vincent, okay?
Hi, my name is Vincent Rondinelli. I'm a real estate broker and property manager here in Buffalo, New York, here in Niagara County. I supervise about 7 agents and manage about 100 units. I recently built a single-family house in the city of Buffalo, one of the first under the new Green Code zoning.
My name is Christina Tretter-Herriger. I'm a real estate attorney and also a business management consultant. In my real estate practice, I focus on residential transactions for either small investors or primary homeowners. In my business management practice, I do have some people with rental property portfolios, and I also do have my own group of small portfolio houses that I rent out myself.
Awesome.
My name is Adam Bojak. I'm also an attorney here in Western New York area. I practice in real estate and estate planning and other areas of law, but I also like to focus on housing, and I have a very strong practice around tenants' rights and eviction defense, foreclosure defense, and things like that, and making sure that all the parties in the landlord-tenant relationship know their responsibilities and their rights.
Excellent. So thank you all for being here again on the DJ Starr Show. And let's jump right in. All right. So I know Vincent. Is it Vincent or Vinny?
Vinny.
Okay, I'm being all formal, right? All right. So Vinny reached out to me. I thought it was so pretty cool about Vinny doing this, and he brought up the topic on Buffalo housing, right? On the subject of tenant and property owners' rights. So Vinny, kind of give me a backstory of why did you want to do this show?
So I wanted to do the show. I was looking online for debates on one side or the other, landlord rights, tenants' rights, and I found that there was nothing where people on one side or the other were actually sitting at the same table, or if there was a mix of opinions. Everything is nothing's black and white, right? Everybody finds some things for tenants that they should have, and some things for landlords, property owners that they should have. And I feel like this would have been a good opportunity to get some of those ideas out there.
Awesome. So give us a little definition of real estate agent and broker, for those that don't know.
So a real estate agent is the first level to become a broker, let's say. So a real estate agent, you can help people buy, sell, rent, things like that. And then a broker is above that. So a broker owns the company, and real estate agents work for the broker. In order to be a broker, you had to have been an agent for a while. Very similar job, but the broker is essentially the boss of the company.
Gotcha. So guys, be a broker. All right, so let's jump right in real quick. Okay, so it's a buzz thing going on, right? And I want you guys to explain to our viewing audience here, what is the good cause eviction bill? What is that all about? This is the first time I've heard this myself, so please educate us on what that bill is. Let's start with Christina.
Well, the good cause eviction bill, and I honestly actually believe Adam would be the best one to summarize it.
Okay.
I'm going to defer to him on the summary.
Sure, thank you. So the good cause eviction bill is a bill that's currently pending in the New York legislature. It was introduced before, but didn't quite make it. But the basic idea is that as a tenant, as long as you pay your rent on time every month, and you follow your lease, you do not break any provisions in your lease, then you get to stay in your home. So it's a way to stabilize people's housing, it's a way to stabilize our neighborhoods, and also stabilize the housing market in general so that people aren't always being forced out of their homes looking for new housing. We have a lot of difficulties here in Western New York around our housing, and that was true before COVID as well as now. COVID has simply just made everything worse. So this is a way to stabilize people's housing. Now, it wouldn't cover people not paying rent. It wouldn't cover people who are nuisances or dangers to their neighbors. It is simply just saying, as long as you as a tenant, as long as you follow the rules, pay your rent, you get to stay in your home.
Gotcha. Now I know there are other states like California, New Jersey that already passed this particular bill. Why do you think this is being held up here in New York State?
Here in New York, there's a very strong real estate lobby. There's a real estate board of New York, which is based down in New York City, but they spend a lot of money lobbying our legislature. And so we had strong tenant protections in place, specifically down in the 5 boroughs and the surrounding areas. But even those have been lost over the decades. And so now the tenant groups are starting to fight back in a way and just saying that we want more stability in our lives. And they're starting to work together and asking our assembly people and our senators to pass good cause eviction protection.
Gotcha. All right. What are the effects of the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019? Who wants to answer that?
That one came about. It did make more measures for protecting tenants. So you used to be able to charge, for someone to move into an apartment, you could have first month's rent, the security deposit, and the last month's rent, which you can no longer do. You can only have the first month's rent and the deposit. There are definitely protections for tenants for that, but it can also make a landlord less likely to give somebody who might be borderline in terms of qualifying for the apartment a chance, because you used to be able to say, all right, well, you seem like you really need this apartment, you seem like a good person, credit's borderline, so can I get 3 months rent in advance?
Gotcha.
And you cannot legally do that anymore. I think there's a question about also pet deposits, like whether those are legal.
Yeah,
so it makes it harder. Sometimes tenants who had maybe a poor credit picture, but they were able to pay and they were responsible and they did want to be good tenants. They used to be able to say, well, here's extra rent up front. The other thing that it did, which I personally am in complete agreement with, is that it increased the notice period for the landlord to say, this lease needs to be over for whatever reason. So if the tenant has been there for less than a year, you have to give them 30 days notice. If they've been there for 2 years, you have to give them 60 days. And if they've been there for 3 years or longer, they have to be there for 90. You have to give them 90 days notice. And that's true even if they're now month to month. So even if they are month to month, if they can give the landlord 30 days notice, if they've been there for over 3 years, you can't tell them to leave with less than 3 months notice.
Wow, see, this is definitely good information. We're gonna take a break right here, and we're gonna come right back and dive into some more questions, all right? So stay tuned.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
I'm a first-generation Filipino American.
You don't always feel you're a part of the country you live in. It's this weird middle space sometimes that you have to live inside of. But when you meet others that are also living in that space, you'll learn to know that it's its own unique space too.
Welcome back to the DJ Starr Show. I'm your host, DJ Starr. And today we have a phenomenal show. This is my first real estate show here. And today's topic is talking about tenant and landlord owners' rights, basically, right? And we have our wonderful panelists here. We have Vinny, we have Christina, and we have Adam here. And we have two attorneys, actually. This is even better. Like, yay, you know. But anyway, so I want to get back to you, Vinny. Let's talk about the good cause eviction bill. What is your view on that?
So good cause eviction, I feel like it's well-intentioned, but it's not going to affect the tenants the way they want. I'll give you a quick example.
Okay.
So in the law, it says that you can raise the rent only 3%. There's some other some other factors that
Okay.
but let's just say, for example, 3%. So if you have, like, say, $750 rent, I would personally, like right now, without good cause eviction, if you had $750 rent and you were a good tenant, I'd probably let you roll. You know, I'd just go maybe in 5 years, take a look again, maybe raise it like $50 or something like that. You know? Now, since the rules say that I won't be able to raise it $50 in 5 years, I'm going to have to raise it 3% every year. So if you look at it, and if you compound $750 over 5 years, the rent will be $860, around $860 at that 5-year mark if you raise it 3% every year. I feel like that is more than I would have raised it without the bill. Another thing is, it says, so there's good cause. So if you don't pay, you can get evicted, or if you're a nuisance, you can get evicted. Defining what a nuisance is would probably be the opinion of a judge. And every judge in every county in New York is going to have a different opinion. And you're not going to have a unified set of measures to justify a nuisance. Another thing is to justify a nuisance, they might want testimony from other tenants. That's open to the judge. That's possibly something they could do. And I don't know if tenants would want to be on record to say, hey, this guy, this guy is doing,
Who I
things.
live with, right underneath me or right above me.
Right. They're being loud and all the disrespectful and all that stuff. That's a nuisance.
One of the other things. So a lot of people. There was the state had a 8-hour conference on whether this is good or bad just recently, and one of the things that a lot of the landlord advocates actually didn't bring up is I feel like this would affect smaller landlords more than any other person that owns like large buildings, let's say. I can give you a couple examples. So this is basically a perpetual lease. So a person, if they pay rent, they can stay in there as long as they want. If it's a single family house, and let's say somebody lived in that house and they bought another house and they rent that one out, they won't be able to evict that person to sell. Let's say if they die and their estate inherits it, then you have people that aren't landlords taking over property that essentially have to be landlords. Also with retirement, people buy their houses and they focus and say, that's going to be my retirement. I'm going to sell that when I want, and I'm going to have whatever money. If you have a tenant in there, granted, you can sell it with a tenant in there, but I'd highly advise it. As a real estate broker, I would highly advise not selling a single family house with a tenant in it. Many reasons. One, very disruptive to the tenant. So a tenant that lives there, they're going to have to have all these people come in. Another thing is you won't get the top dollar as if it were vacant, because people that are going to spend top dollar on a single family house are the people that are going to live in it. And if there's a tenant in there, that person, you're not going to be able to live in that house. So I feel like there'll be a lot of unintended consequences as a result of it.
Because I know I was doing my research. A lot of some of the landlords were against this particular bill. All right, and it was, like I said, I saw a video earlier, and it was pretty funny actually. I forgot the guy's name though. He was a comedian, and this whole, like I said before, the good cause eviction bill is really to protect the tenant. At the end of the day, and like you said before, in your opinion, it kind of affects the small, the business guy as yourself, right?
Yes.
So that's why you kind of like, so to speak. But
Well, Adam needed mention that there's this huge landlord lobby that is, promoting this, or that the tenant advocates are responding to. But those are the big landlords in New York City who own enormous portfolios. Those are the, locally the Nick Sinatras. Those are the people the advocates are responding to. But here in Western New York, really the landscape is different. We have so many doubles, people living in their lower, and then they rent out their upper unit. And
Right.
so many people they have maybe 2 other houses in addition to the ones they live in, and they're local, they're in the community, they're right here. I know my tenants. I have, just 3 houses, 4 if you count the one that's actually my mother's.
Okay.
And I know my tenants, and if they're having a problem with they break up with their girlfriend, like right before Thanksgiving, I'll call them and say, hey, are you somewhere for Thanksgiving, or do you need me to bring by a plate or something? So this legislation that is targeted to defending tenants against these huge, conglomerates
Right.
are then it stands a very good chance of pushing out those small, local, committed landlords. And then what you end up having, when they all sell their houses, who is going to buy a house with a tenant in it? Not a single family, not someone that intends to own or occupy. That's when you get private equity, REITs, foreign investors buying up these properties, and you're going to end up not with mom and pop landlords who've been pushed out by legislation that is reacting to Nick Sinatra, and everybody's going to be living under a REIT.
Oh, that's not good.
So there are a lot of ins and outs. And one thing I will say before I go into everything is that the people sitting at this table right now are good people,
Right.
but not everybody is a good person, especially people that own a house that somebody else lives in. And so we have to make sure that the system we build is making sure that the worst possible scenarios are not allowed. And over and over and over again, I speak with tenants who say, my rent was $650 or $700 a month, and they just told me it's going to be $1,200 next month. And I can't afford that.
That's a lot.
So what this does is saying you cannot increase the rent by that much, because it's basically, that is an eviction. Just you're avoiding the court and evicting them in a different sense.
Right.
And then that person usually is lower income, and they can't find anything else in their price range in that neighborhood. So you're moving this person out of this home that they've been in for 10, 15, 20 years maybe, and they can't find anything else in that neighborhood. They have to just uproot their entire lives. And most of the tenants I talk to, I go into their homes, there's nothing on the walls because they know they're gonna get kicked out soon. They don't actually put down roots. And like I said, I know the people sitting at this table are not the ones doing this, but I know that the landlords that are, we have to make sure that they are not able to continue to ruin people's lives, right? And so this bill is just a small way to bring some balance back to the legal relationship between a landlord and a tenant. And I totally get the idea that you cannot sell a single family home that has a tenant in there if the person is trying to make it their principal residence. However, the good cause eviction bill does have a provision saying if you are going to make that apartment, a house, if you're going to make that your principal residence, that is grounds to ask somebody to leave. So if you are going to be moving in, you can ask that tenant to move out.
That's true. That's true. All right. Well, this is another wrap up here for this segment. This is going pretty fast, right? Oh my gosh. So take a pause right here. Do not go. We'll be right back.
I'm Chris Jakimick. I served in the United States Air Force and I deployed 3 times. So in 2017, I was serving as an Air Force First Sergeant. Our motto in that role is my job is people, everyone is my business. But unfortunately in that year, I would lose my own brother, Lance Corporal Adam Jakimick, to suicide. The majority of veteran suicides are from guns. I store my weapons securely, not only for myself, but for my family. My service never stops.
I can't believe I'm missing this.
Don't get stuck at home with the flu. A flu shot is the best way to prevent the flu and its potentially serious complications. Don't get flu FOMO. Learn more at getmyflushot.org.
I'm so proud to call you my son.
Welcome back to the DJ Starr Show. I'm your host, DJ Starr, and today we're talking about tenant and landlord's rights. And this conversation is going so well, and the segments are going too quickly. So we're gonna come back eventually and have more segments and have more talks around real estate and housing and just and the laws that we have no idea about as well, right? They change all the time. So we're gonna switch gears a little bit in this particular segment and talk about more about affordable housing. We're gonna start with you, Christina.
So there are a lot of factors that affect the availability and the affordability of housing, and especially rental apartments. And everything from when the federal government stops investing in localities, then cities have to run like a business. They have to attract high net worth people with big incomes so they can tax them. They have to get housing more expensive so the property taxes go up because that source of federal funding they have to make it up somehow.
Gotcha.
I feel that also when developers are allowed to, they're given tax breaks to build these huge apartment buildings, and then there isn't a requirement that they do a percentage of affordable units as well. That's absolutely something, in my opinion, that should happen. When a big company like Tesla gets an incentive to set up here, there should be a requirement that they contribute somehow to affordable housing for their employees or to public transit so that people can get back and forth. And underinvestment in public transit also makes housing less affordable because people have to be, they can't spread out more, they don't have good access to get to work, so it makes certain neighborhoods much more desirable. One thing that I feel, these are all legislation that we could enact. Good cause is legislation that we could enact. There are legislations currently in force right now that we are not enforcing. One huge pressure on affordable housing, in my opinion, is the Airbnb market. Taking a unit off the market from local residents, there is a huge financial incentive. Depending on what zip code you're in, you can make 4 times as much as regular rent, renting it out to short-term tourists who it's just capital extraction from Buffalo. There is a huge incentive to do that. And there is actually a New York State law that if your unit is more than 2 units, you cannot do it.
Really?
You cannot rent out an Airbnb unless you are in the unit as well, in a 3-unit house. And New York State enacted this legislation, it's statewide, it's not Buffalo, so that because of the pressure that Airbnb puts on the market. And I've actually had a seller came to me that he wanted to know, I have this 3-unit Airbnb in a very desirable location and the neighbors are getting squirrely about it, and I just want to make sure that I'm not facing any problems. And I said, I can't help you. You can't have an Airbnb in a 3-unit in New York State. You can't do it. Even unless you're renting to people for 30 days or more, even having the ad up is a fine. One of my friends at the time was looking for housing in that exact neighborhood and couldn't find an affordable place because this out-of-state investor had this 3-unit Airbnb in a very desirable neighborhood, and he was using it to make $4,000 a month per unit.
Per unit.
When he found out that I could not get him around this legislation, eventually his neighbors were going to start calling 311 and he was going to start facing fines. He sold the house to somebody who moved in and owner occupied. It frustrates me that we're having this good cause conversation about more new legislation when we already have legislation that if we would just enforce it, if activists would just browse Airbnb and see where the listings are, do like a demo stay in a listing and see, this is clearly a 3-unit, and you can start making investors shy away from that. And then that legislation is already targeted at the big guys. It's already targeted at the people who don't live here. It's already targeted. It was a textbook case. It was last summer. I had an out-of-state investor who ran up against the Airbnb legislations, and when he realized that those rules were there and his neighbors were going to enforce them, he sold, and somebody who came in who was going to live in that house. So I think that it's wonderful to have good cause legislation. I certainly believe that we can have notice periods. You can have a 3-month notice period, longer notice periods before you raise rent. But I think we should focus on enforcing the legislation that already exists before we just make more rules.
Wow, I didn't even know that. I told you, I am definitely learning so much from you all. So what else you want to add to this? This is a lot. I'm learning from you guys, so just keep talking. So what else do you want to
Well, I can talk about affordable housing.
Yes.
So one of the barriers to affordable housing is cost of building affordable housing. To build a house right now, if you had a piece of land and you just wanted to get a modular home put on it, the modular home is going to cost $350,000.
Now, what's a modular home?
A home already made, homemade, and then they come and they slap it together, room by room on site.
Okay.
I just built a house. It cost me $500,000 to build a house. I had some nicer and nicer things on the inside. It's not even the cost of the land. The cost of the land was not a lot. But the cost of these properties, it's difficult to justify selling them for a loss. If you're gonna sell a house, if you're gonna sell a house, let's talk about Lovejoy. We were talking about Lovejoy before the camera came on. There were 2 houses that the Erie County Land Bank, or it's like, I forget the acronym, but they just sold the house. They built 2 houses there. I don't know how much it cost them to sell them, but they ended up selling them for $155,000. There's no way you can build a new house anywhere and sell it for $155,000 and make money on it. So I feel like that's one big issue. I think supply is probably one of the biggest things. So building housing costs money, and if people can't afford what it costs to build a new house, then there's going to be an affordable housing problem. One last thing I wanted to add was I forgot what it was. I got a lot of things.
It's okay. We're going to stop right here because, like I said, these segments are going too quickly. Great conversation. We're going to come back and we're going to wrap things up and have last words, okay? So stay tuned. Do not turn that down. We'll be right back.
What do an aerospace engineer, cancer immunologist, and bat scientist all have in common? We all have cool jobs in STEM fields. Whether it's building robots or learning to code, girls everywhere are finding their passion for science, technology, engineering, and math through positive role models and mentors. So dare to dive in, get connected, and explore. You never know what your future may hold. Learn more about these and even more cool jobs at shecanstem.com.
There's just something special about this place. It feels like home. The fresh air and the vast expanse of green, all here for us to enjoy and to care for.
Welcome back to the DJ Starr Show. I'm your host, DJ Starr. We are here talking about tenant and landlord rights. This is my first real estate conversation. I'm excited to have 3 phenomenal guests here today. We have Benny, Christine, and Adam. All right, let's jump back in. We were talking about affordable housing in the last segment. And I know you have something to say about that as well, Adam. Let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So affordable housing is incredibly important, as what was mentioned, is that supply is a huge issue,
Yes.
right? So not only does Buffalo have the oldest housing stock in the nation, but we also went through a period of huge population loss over the decades. And so we had, over the past couple of decades, thousands of empty homes knocked down. And now we have a shortage of housing, unfortunately, because my main point here is that this is not just a new problem. And the fact that the private sector is now forced to make up these gaps in housing, and they're forced to take on the burden of building affordable housing, is a failure of our government at all levels. As Christina was talking about the pulling of federal funding. Our Buffalo Municipal Housing Authority, the BMHA housing, has been falling apart for a long time, decades upon decades of underfunding, and they just knocked down a bunch of them because they just let them rot. And the same thing is happening with the Perrys, and the same thing is happening with others underneath the BMHA umbrella. And so our government also has a responsibility to its residents to make sure that the public housing is up to code, safe, and available. A waiting list for BMHA housing is years long right now. And so talking about affordable housing, it can't just be public sector, it must be public as well. I'm sorry, private sector, it must be public as well.
Right. Gotcha. Oh my gosh, crazy. Let's kind of zigzag over to the voucher payments. I'm gonna have.
So vouchers, vouchers are important. They're a critical part of stabilizing rents and getting people paid for the housing they provide, keeping people in housing. Some of the issues, I do have some issues with the Section 8 program in particular. One is it's not an income, it's a business. You have a business relationship with the federal government. The federal government requires you to meet particular standards in housing, which in some older housing is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to fulfill. Also, if for some reason, whether it's you don't pass your inspection, that tenant does not owe you the money for that rent, and then until you meet it, whether it's just painting a cabinet, which you have to do in for Section 8, or anything else. So I feel like for voucher payments are difficult for smaller landlords to take on because they are it's a relationship, it's a contractual relationship, doing business with the federal government, and that is extremely hard to do. But vouchers are important. They need to be expanded. They have to be done, and I hope the state and the federal government makes it easier for people to receive vouchers and to give them more.
Okay. Wow. Well, it's the last segment here. We're going to wrap things up a bit. So we're going to go around the table and let everybody give like a 2-minute last thoughts about topic on today. Let's start with that.
So yeah, I really want to thank you for having me on, having us on. This has been very, very important. This is an important conversation we need to continue having. And some statistics that I want people to know is that about 60% of the people living in the city of Buffalo are renters. And about 50% of those renters are rent burdened. And that means that they're paying more than 30% of their monthly income on their housing. And well over half of our children are living in poverty. And if you isolate it by non-white children, it goes much higher. And so good cause eviction is a great bill that I hope passes, but it doesn't get to the root causes of eviction. Whereas we were talking about the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019. It stabilized the eviction process, but it doesn't address the root causes. And so what I want everybody to know, whether you're a small landlord who owns a couple properties, or you're a tenant who is having difficulties with your landlord, these people should be working together, because when tenants have more money in their pockets, they make their rent payments on time more often. And so we need to make sure that the Sinatras and the Simonellis and these large housing corporations are not buying up our cities. We're gonna be sure that our neighborhoods are stabilized and people stay in the homes that they've been living in for decades. And we have to make sure the fabric of our society is not continuing to deteriorate as our government has let it do for so many decades. We have to work together on all these things. We can improve our housing because there's really nowhere else to go but up from where we are.
That's true. All right, Christina?
Just to piggyback on that, I think that there should be more of a social safety net in this country. The social safety net that we have is fairly laughable if you compare it to other developed nations. I think that COVID and the eviction moratorium just exposed the complete lack of a social safety net. And what the government basically did was said, well, now we're gonna have the moratorium. Nobody can evict anybody, and they stuck private landlords with the bill, quite literally, because the landlords still have to, if the heat's included in the rent, they still have to heat the property, they still have to maintain the property, they can't get anybody to leave, they can't get paid. So I believe that we need to absolutely create a robust social safety net rather than just sticking it to private landlords. And there are so many ways that we could do that. My analogy to that is we should have universal health care in this country. The reason that we don't is not because individual doctors need to charge for their fees.
All right, great.
Universal health care and public education, that's very important.
Yes.
College education. So I spoke a lot today, so I'm just gonna real quick finish off with a verse from the Tao Te Ching. I should have this memorized, but we got one take, so I'm going to read it. If you want to be a great leader, you must follow the Tao. Stop trying to control, let go of fixed plans and concepts, and the world will govern itself. How do I know this is so? Because in this world, the greater the restrictions and prohibitions, the more people are impoverished. The more advanced the weapons of state, the darker the nation. The more artful and crafty the plan, the stranger the outcome. The more laws are posted, the more thieves appear. Therefore, the sage says, I take no action, and people are reformed. I enjoy peace, and people become honest. I do nothing, and people become rich. If I keep from imposing on people, they become themselves.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's for today. This is it. This was a great conversation. Thank you again for coming on the show and sharing all this knowledge. And like I said before, this was new to me as well. I'm so glad that you reached out to me to have this conversation. There are so much more topics we can touch on. So stay tuned for that. It's gonna be more of the show coming up as well, like a part 2 coming up. Okay. So stay tuned for that as well. This is your girl DJ Starr. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful year, a wonderful 2022 regards to the pandemic. And wherever you do, keep your eye on the prize. We're out.